Welcome back to Local 4 Plus Live, everyone. I hope we've got you ready for your entire day with our news break in Detroit and Metro Detroit. And now it's time for the interview that we teased at the top of the show. Now, many of us have the desire to have more meaning in our lives, to make an impact where we live, but it seems like such a large and daunting task. But there is a way to make it happen with some simple steps. And today we are joined by author Debbie Peterson, who wrote the book, Local Impact, You Can Make a Difference, and she's going to walk us through ways to make this happen. Good morning, and thank you for being with us on Local 4 Plus Live.
Good morning. I'm delighted to be talking with you here in Detroit.
Yes, it is great to have you. So I want to start with a quote of yours. You say, if you want a rich and happier life, the best thing that you can do is get involved in your local community. Now, why do you believe this to be true?
Well, for one, it's a proven fact. The United Nations has interviewed millions of people all over the world, and the consensus of all of these folks is the way to be happiest is to be in community, is to be working together. And so, and I certainly can tell you that it's been a very fulfilling thing for me to do, to be involved in my local community.
Yeah, you have some incredible accomplishments. One being the first female elected mayor of Grover Beach, California. You recently released a book. These are some pretty incredible accomplishments right there. And now, did those things help you, especially being the first elected mayor of Grover Beach, did that give you part of what you needed in terms of being part of your local community and serving? Was that part of it?
No, it wasn't. In fact, those things came after serving. I started out on the planning commission, appointed by the city council there, then ran for city council, was there for 4 years, had the great privilege of serving my community as the mayor for 2 years. And I now serve on a homeowner association board and served on loads of boards while I was there, air boards, water boards, tourist boards. I've been on all the boards you can think of, from good, bad, great, indifferent, ugly, everything you can imagine. And that's where I've come up with my 5 top tips.
Okay.
And I wrote the book later. I wrote the books later. And this one is actually the third in the series. This is the one for everyday people, saying, here's how you can do it. Here are the top tips.
No, this is exciting because I think a lot of us want to do more. We want to be more active in our community. It just seems like too big of a task. So let's go through some of your suggestions on how people can start to make an impact. And first you say, we have to show up.
Yes, the first thing is just to show up, and it's easy to find these meetings. You'll find them online. And I'll tell you that the first time I showed up, I was pretty scared. I went to a city council meeting. I thought I was going to be able to just sit in the audience, and that's important. When there are bodies there, the people you elect know you're paying attention. They know they're being watched. They behave better. And so that's what I thought I was going to be doing, just figuring it out, just watching, getting to know it. And it turned out that it was a workshop. And I was new in town, and I had to talk with people in the community and figure out, it was a visioning workshop. How did we want our community to be in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years? So I ended up getting thrown in at the deep end. And now, 20 years later, it's incredibly encouraging. It's so exciting. I walk down the street and I can see the changes that we envisioned as a community. It's very positive. So just show up, and usually it won't be quite as scary as that.
Okay, that's got to be, I was just going to say, it's got to be exciting to actually see what you guys talked about, what you planned, actually come to life in your community.
Yeah, that's one of those happiness things. You see it every single day, because cities have so much to do with our day-to-day lives. Your city is responsible for your fire department, your police department, your streets, the quality of your water, even the quality of your air to some extent. And so they really impact your day-to-day lives. And that's why it's so important to pay attention and get involved. And the second way that you can do that is to speak up. And speaking up is also pretty scary. And I finally got to a normal council meeting when I was still new in town, and I was sitting listening, and I realized I knew some things that maybe they didn't know and that maybe they should hear. And I thought, oh, they don't want to hear what I have to say, but there was no one else in the meeting. So I figured it was probably pretty safe to stand up and say something. And I did. And as I was talking, all of a sudden they started smiling and nodding. And I realized that they wanted to hear what I had to say, because they don't know what it's like on my street unless I tell them. And it was then that I understood that when we elect people to represent us, they need to know how we would like to be represented. So speaking up is really very important.
Yeah, if you don't say something like you made a perfectly good point. If I don't tell them what it's like in my community or in my neighborhood, there's no way for them to know. And you can't really complain without speaking up, I feel like.
Yeah, and that's what really has so much power these days is when we hear from people what it's like to be who they are, it changes us. It creates better community
Mm.
for all of us. And then that leads to the fourth thing, which is chin up, because it doesn't happen right away. It's a marathon, not a sprint. It takes time. And before that, of course, before we get to that stage, we have to meet up. And
Yes.
when you get to the meetings, take people with you and get to know people. Go out for coffee with them. That it has been the most gratifying thing for me. I ended up meeting people, getting to know people that I would never have had the opportunity to meet, and we would probably never have had anything to do with each other. And yet now, because we worked together for so many years on really important projects and taking down some corruption in our town, because of that, now when we get together, we hug each other. People who were so different, so
Hmm.
diverse that we probably never would have even gone near one another initially. So be sure that you meet up, introduce yourself to other like-minded people in meetings. And that's then where the chin up comes in, where you have
Yeah.
to realize the fourth one, which is that it's a marathon, not a sprint.
I think that part of that is that everyone wants to see change happen immediately, and I think that that's part of managing our expectations, right? And I mentioned that even in introing you, because everyone wants immediate gratification. We wanted it done yesterday, because by the time you even think about getting involved, you've probably been frustrated with something for a very long time, and you want it to change like this. So explain to us why it's really important to understand that this is a long game and not a short game.
And that's where we lose people, and that's where we lose the ability to really have influence in our communities, because it's so frustrating, and you feel so passionate about things, and sometimes you're so annoyed and so fed up. And with democracy, everybody gets a voice. The strongest voices win, the most votes win, but the minority is heard. And it is the most frustrating way possible to ever make a decision.
Hmm.
And it's also the best way to make decisions. And so it's really important to remember that, as you say, it is a long game. It does take time. And so the fifth way then is, once you finally won that battle, you've been working for something really hard. In our case, it was hundreds of people who went to sewer board meetings. We were hearing from people at city council meetings that surfers would come to the city council meetings
Mm.
every other week, and they would talk to us about how they were getting sick when they were surfing.
Wow.
And then we had three whistleblowers out of five people at the sewer plant. I mean, 3 out of 9 people at the sewer plant, and they're telling us, and they're whistleblowing and they're losing their jobs. And we're thinking, but it wasn't until I was the mayor that I could do something about this. And it was because the surfers came week after week, month after month, and because the whistleblowers were willing to lose their jobs to tell the truth, that we were finally able to change things and reorganize it, get a new administrator. And that took 6 years. And
Wow.
for a democracy, it's the slowest way to make decisions, but it's the most effective way. For a democracy, 6 years is pretty fast. Sometimes things happen more quickly, but often it takes a very long time. And that's then where you have to follow up, because it was still another 3 years of over 100 people going to meetings every 2 weeks demanding an audit. It took that long for us to get the audit that forced our district attorney to press charges against the administrator, felony charges for self-dealing, and he was finally convicted. And so it is definitely a long haul, and you do have to follow up, because what happens is the folks who are involved in the corruption, they're going to keep their people in there because they want to cover their backsides and make sure that things don't get uncovered. And in some cases, they want to keep the scam going. And they have lots of different ways of keeping their scams going, and lots of different scams. And the problem with that, well, the good thing about it is they do get caught, and it ruins their lives. And that's important, because it also ruins our lives. If they're taking the money that's there for our health and our safety, which means perhaps we don't have enough to fund another firefighter or to put a police officer in when there's a shooting, then it's our grandma who dies because the equipment wasn't there, or the firefighters couldn't get there quickly, or the medics couldn't get to her, or the hospitals didn't have what they needed. It kills people when there's corruption. And that's why we need to pay attention. It's for all of our health and safety and our happiness.
That's right. That's right. Now, how would you encourage people to not get weary and to keep going?
Hang in there with other people, because the relationships that you build will remind you that most of the people are good, and they'll comfort you, they'll reassure you, and they'll have great ideas. And it takes a village. All of us have different gifts. Some of us are great at just sitting in the meeting, being part of a crowd, because the more people there, the more power you have. And some people are great at speaking. Some people can be mayors and council members, but we all have something, and we have to give according to what we have. And so if we're all doing that, we will be cohesive, we'll have community, and hang in there with your community. And that's the best way to stay heartened in all of it. And the more of
Yeah.
us who do it, the more heartened we all are.
Indeed, indeed. These are great tips. And like I said, they manage our expectations. They're very clear on what we need to do, but also understanding that this is work. It doesn't happen overnight. Mayor Debbie, where can people get your book?
My book is at mayordebbie.com. You can go there and find out anything you need to find out, all kinds of helpful information, and you'll get it at Amazon or anywhere that you buy books. And actually what happened is I ended up coming up against the corruption when cannabis came to town that I really couldn't beat. And so I started writing, and I wrote my first book, which was the happiest corruption, sleaze, lies, and suicide in a California beach town. So I have a whole series of
Wow.
books that talk about why local government is important, what we can do about it. And those are all available at Amazon.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. I'm definitely going to be checking your book out. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you. It's lovely to be in Detroit.
All right.
Look